Hey there, I'm Alan Firstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey Mark, how's it going?
Hey, Alan, it's going fine. It's lots of things keeping us busy, I'm sure.
Oh, that, yeah, you could say that.
You know,
Yeah, it's a little crazy for me these days. As a GDE, I deal with a lot of Google stuff, and boy, has there been a lot of Google stuff suddenly announced. And we'll talk about some of this on future episodes because there's a lot of stuff that's going on. But I kind of want to focus on just one thing today, and it's a big enough thing, and it's this thing called Gemini.
wait, isn't Gemini two things?
You know,
Sorry.
you no no no, you'd think that given the name. And certainly once upon a time we could say that it was two things. We would be able to say that, we have this model called Gemini, and we have an API for that model called the Gemini API. And everything is now suddenly different. Uh, Google published a blog post with under Sundar Pichai's byline, the CEO's byline,
Mhm.
and it kind of radically changed things. So while Gemini is still a model, it's now bigger, much bigger.
So this is probably the time where we need to at least briefly mention the passing of Bard.
Well, Bard isn't gone, just, got a new name.
Okay.
And while it got a new name, it split into two. Hence, we're back to the Gemini theme again. So the first thing is that Bard is now Gemini the chatbot, as I like to think about it.
Okay.
And Gemini the chatbot also has a twin, Gemini Advanced the chatbot. So so these two chatbots have underneath them, they're built on top of Gemini the model, two different versions of the model, one Gemini Pro and the more advanced version called Gemini Ultra 1.0, plus other models. So Gemini, the chatbot, the basic chatbot, actually both of them also have access to Imagen to create images and probably some other stuff under there. So it's not just a model. There's a lot
Okay.
going on under the hood. They provide access to some of your personal resources inside Google, like your email, your Google Drive, and other things. So Bard has gotten a rename and a promotion, and lots of other shiny new toys. And I think it kind of emphasizes what Gemini is evolved into is, it's not just the code name for an AI model. It's a product. And it emphasizes the shift, I think, from we're Google and we're going to be providing technology. Now it's kind of saying, well, yeah, there's technology under there, but more importantly, it's technology that does something.
So let's just quickly kind of like a high level compare Gemini with OpenAI. With OpenAI, it's a chatbot. You can talk with it. It uses
Well,
different models, and there's different versions of different models. So, what's similar and what's different?
so OpenAI is the company, just
Mhm.
like Google is the company. They provide a chatbot that they call ChatGPT,
Right.
and that's similar to the Gemini chatbot. ChatGPT is built on a number of different models. So, for example, there is GPT 3.5, there is GPT 4, but it also has models like DALL-E 3, which does image generation, and some other models that are under the hood there as well. Additionally, and this, we're going to keep making these analogies here, the GPT-3.5 model has an API. So does the GPT-4, so does DALL-E 3, so forth and so on. That API is available directly from OpenAI, or it's available from Microsoft through the Azure platform, in the same way that the Gemini API is available and provides access to the different levels of the Gemini model. Gemini Pro, for example, Gemini Pro Vision. Eventually, we expect that Gemini Ultra, the larger model, will be available. Gemini Nano is available on Android. That's a different creature. It doesn't really have another analogy. So, but I wanted to mention it for developers, because, we are developers. This is a developer show.
We are.
We are, and I'll explain why this is relevant in a minute. And that those models, that API, is available both through Google Cloud Platform and through a separate generative AI platform. So that's kind of all your parallels there.
Okay.
There are certainly things that are different. Like I said, there is the Gemini Nano model, which is available for some Android users right now, but it's a local on-device model. There's no equivalent to that on the OpenAI side. And OpenAI is working on a number of other models as well. So we've got the Whisper model, which Google does have equivalents of, and some various others. OpenAI also has this app concept that they're calling GPTs.
Yes.
And at least right now, there's no equivalent to that on the Google side. And we'll see where that evolves. And there are other, similarities, differences, but those are kind of the overall broad parallels between the two.
Okay, so that's good. That's a good overview for those who have maybe followed us this last year, or at least have kind of seen what's happening with OpenAI and then Microsoft and all that stuff, and trying to figure out, okay, Google's coming out with a whole bunch of stuff. Where does that fit? So
where does it fit?
At least that we're in the same ballpark.
Right. And to be fair, we do need to mention that things like Amazon's AWS does have its Bedrock platform, and Bedrock provides access to their model, as well as models from other companies and independents. Mm-hmm. Similar but not identical to how Google Cloud provides access to other models through its model garden. So, the big three cloud providers, there are similarities, but some big differences as well between all of them. And I think another time we're going to go into some of the details about how Bedrock works and how it differs from what Google is offering and what Azure is offering.
Well, that sounds good. Good overview on that.
And I think it is important that we as developers understand the platforms that are out there, the tools that are out there. Trust me, there are plenty of tools out there, and we'll be talking about more of them in the future. But I think focusing on, trying to, when we say, ChatGPT, we mean something very specific. And we mean a chatbot. It's not a developer system, because the developer part of that is accessing the underlying model, GPT-3.5 or GPT-4.
Via some sort of an API hosted or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. Which we as developers can do. We should do. This is good tools for us. But let's not try to mix terms and say, I'm accessing ChatGPT through this program that I wrote. You're not.
Right.
ChatGPT is an app with a particular set of built-in tuning and parameters and other things to it. GPT-4 is a model and environment, and the two are slightly different.
Yeah. So, for example, you could use the model and API and some customized prompts to create a kind of an equivalent of ChatGPT.
Exactly.
But that's ChatGPT is ChatGPT is the app the consumer-facing app. And what we as developers presumably create are apps that are user-facing, but we want to understand what tools are in our belt so that we can use AI as it makes sense in what we're doing.
Exactly. And this kind of goes into what Gemini, the name, is now becoming. It is not just the underlying technology, the model, the API. It's actually the entire suite of tools that Google has built themselves on that lower level platform. So the first out of the gate are Gemini and Gemini Advanced chatbots. But it's going further. So, over the past year, Google has talked about a product they were calling Duet AI. And what Duet AI would do is it would help you write code. It's code completion like Copilot is. Or it's helping you write your email, or write a doc, or work in a spreadsheet, or help navigate Google's documentation, or a number of other things. All of that is now also becoming part of Gemini. So we're going to have all of these custom Gemini assistants all under this big banner name. And if we think about it, we can now think about the fact that what we as developers can do with the Gemini API are write our own Gemini assistants. So Google is making a bunch of Gemini assistant tools, and so can we.
All
And
right.
that's I think an important thing to kind of wrap our heads around as developers.
Yeah, I agree. This just makes me think about like on the Microsoft side of things, there's this whole rebranding where everything's being rebranded as a Copilot. So this is
Exactly.
kind of the same type of thing with Google. Everything's being rebranded as Gemini.
Right. The biggest difference is that Google decided to just use Gemini for everything. Everything. Which is, it's a little bit confusing, but it does mean that when we are talking about Gemini, we now need to be precise.
Yep.
Are we talking about Gemini, the model, which we may be able to fine tune someday? Are we talking about the Gemini API so that we can now make calls to, the Gemini Pro or the Gemini Ultra model? Are we talking about Gemini for developers, which is a set of tools which do code completion? So that as we're typing along, it will suggest ways to complete this code, or that we can ask to write the tests to test our code. We need to be precise when we ask questions, when we are talking about these different things. What is it we're talking about?
And we might wear multiple hats. We might use some of the Gemini functionality as a consumer.
Exactly.
But then we also might use Gemini in applications and products that we create.
Exactly. And I think that's important to realize that, if we use Gemini for developers in our IDEs to help us write code, the code that we're writing may be so that we can access Gemini, the API, which accesses Gemini, the model, to do stuff. So we are using it on all of these levels.
Right.
We may then turn to Gemini, the chatbot, to ask questions about how to compile something, or suggestions to help us debug some code. So we can use it both as developers and developer consumers. What I think of it as professionals. We're using it as a professional. We're using it as as a tool. We're using it in all of these different ways, and I think that's good.
Yeah, I do think that's good as well. Plus, it also helps us, especially if we're trying to come to a grips of like, what can this even do? What are the different things it can do? If you start using these different Gemini bots or assistants, and see the different things that they can do, then you can try to, some of it might be functionality that's not quite available to developers yet. That's possible. But in other cases, you might say, oh, I can see kind of how they did this. This is the type of query that they would run against this type of Gemini model. And if that is, the type of thing that you want to emulate in the products that you create, then you've got a good you've got a good idea of kind of like how it works and what might be possible.
Exactly. Although I'd also caution us, if we're playing around with Gemini Advanced, one of the features is that we can say, get this text out of my inbox and tell me about it. Well, Gemini Advanced might be able to do that, but the Gemini API can't do that directly. There are additional things that we need to do to get it to do that. Now, we as developers have the power to do that, but we can't just say, go do it like we are with Gemini. There was coding behind that.
Yeah, so you kind of have to think about your application and say, here's the front end, here's the model that might have been used, but here are the integrations or the access to different data sources that we need to also include to kind of make the complete
Right.
picture.
What these tools do let us do is they do let us say, hey, these are things that might not have been possible before AI models came along. And now they're kind of helping us understand the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
That we as developers can now say, okay, now I understand broadly what AIs can do. Let me plug them into the APIs, the other components, the data sets, the everything else that I already knew how to do. But now I can, do them. I can now give a more natural interface to them.
Yeah.
A more comfortable user interface, a more friendly user. And this is where, we tie into the stuff that we've talked about as voice developers for 3+ years. How do we create that more natural human interface? AI tools like the Gemini API, like the GPT APIs, they let us do that. And then it's our skills that let us connect it up to everything else.
Right.
So you're going to hear more from me about Gemini. You're going to hear more from both of us about all of these technologies out there. We'll be bringing in guest hosts to talk about it.
Yes.
Because there's so much out there that it's really hard to keep our heads focused on what's going on. But we'd also like to hear from you. What are the tools that you're seeing that as a developer let you do things better, easier, deliver better stuff to your clients? What do you want to see? What do you want to hear us talk about? Leave comments below, find us on social media, and we're looking forward to having many, many, many more conversations on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a good week.